Hello, everybody. I'm just going to finish off the Rachel stuff that we talked about on Monday. Just the last two arguments he has against cultural relativism. If you missed that class, or if you forget what I mean by cultural relativism, go back and watch that video again. I'll save your time instead of repeating it here. So the last two arguments that Rachel's gives against the view of cultural relativism, remember that his first three involve three different ways in which accepting cultural relativism seems like you have to bite the bullet or accept something you don't want to. His last two arguments are arguing that a lot of the data that people point to as saying that cultural relativism is correct isn't as persuasive as people like to think. And really, when you look at other cultures and you say, look, they have different values than us, they do things differently than us, they must value human life less, they must care about things differently. What it really is a difference in someplace else. It's either that they find themselves in different conditions, or that they find themselves with different beliefs about how the world is. So really, they value things the same way other people do. It's rather that they experience or imagine the facts of the world differently, or find themselves in extreme circumstances where anybody in that circumstance would do something extreme. So Rachel's calls this different beliefs, not different values / morals. Let's make sure that that's not in the middle of the light. Oh, of course it is. Different beliefs, not different values. So what does he mean by this? Well, you might look at two different cultures. Imagine there's two cultures. One of them believes that people who commit murder should be hung or decapitated or something like that. So we look at these people and we say, culture one, death by hanging. So you might look at this culture and you say, hey, look, this culture believes that the death penalty is okay. Death penalty, okay. You look at this other culture and they don't commit, or they don't have death by hanging. They don't have decapitation. Rather, what happens if someone commits murder is put on boat and sent to sail away from shore. So you can imagine that, so instead of chopping off their heads, you put them on the boat and you tell them just go straight away and we're just going to watch you go. Now, you look at these two cultures and on the surface, it might look like these differences are a sign of cultural relativism. These people think the death penalty is okay. These people don't engage in that behavior. So you might think in that culture, they don't believe the death penalty is okay. And so you look at this and you're like, this is a good evidence of cultural relativism. But that when you look more closely, what might actually be the case is that they just have a different view of the world. Imagine now that culture two thinks that the earth is flat, and that when you sail on a boat straight out to sea, you'll fall off the earth and die. So when you look at this group's practices from the outside, you might think, oh, this is proof that they value human life differently. They have a different view on the death penalty. When really, they have the exact same view as this other culture. They also believe in the death penalty. It's just they have a different view about how the world is. They believe people should be killed. They just have a mistaken belief about what the world is like. So no difference in human life, no difference in death penalty, just a difference in what their beliefs about the world. And what this is supposed to show is that in a lot of cases, we think of something as evidence for cultural relativism, when really we might be ignoring certain factual matters about what their beliefs are. So what Rachel's is trying to say is people point to cultural differences like this and conclude, hey, that's proof that they have different views about what is valuable and what life should be like. When in truth, all it shows is they have different beliefs and their morality could actually be the same. So this is trying to erode some of the evidence for cultural relativism. The last one is instead of different beliefs, not different values, it's different circumstances, not different values, or different environments. So for instance, you look at certain cultures and they do things very, very differently when it comes to life and death. So the example Rachel's gives in the reading, he talks about them as the Eskimos, but I'm going to use the term Inuit because I'm pretty sure that's the term that is better to use now. So Inuit people, and he points out that if you look at the Inuit people, they have a few different practices that are things that we look at and think that's not good. One, infanticide. What is infanticide? Infanticide is the killing of newborn children, and especially infanticide of girls. And so you look at this from the outside and you think, wow, the Inuit culture must not value human life like we do. Adding to that, they also have a practice of after, well, I'm just going to write up, send old people out to freeze to death. So this second bit is when people get to a certain age, they are generally, within Inuit culture, they do not stay in the house to be taken care of by their grandchildren. They instead go outside into the wilderness to freeze to death. So again, you look at this and from the outside, you think, oh, these people must have different values. They must have a different moral system. But when you look more closely at Inuit culture, what you find is actually, in a certain sense, they seem to value human life exactly like we do. And the reason there's infanticide and the reason there's this sending old people out to freeze to death is because they have the exact same values that we do. And rather, what's different is, well, where do the Inuit live? Inuits live in igloos, i.e. houses made of ice, i.e. it's very, very cold there and there's very little food. So in our society, we do not believe that infanticide is acceptable at all. And the idea is, generally speaking, that we think if you do not kill your child, that child is going to have a long and healthy life. Therefore, if you killed your child in this society, it would be very, very cruel. It would be showing a non-value of human life. But in Inuit culture, where food is incredibly scarce and it's very, very cold, sometimes you can't afford for the well-being of everyone to have more mouths than you can afford to feed. So we think of this from our culture as your choice is kill a child and everybody else lives, or don't kill a child and everybody else lives. But in an Inuit circumstance, the difference is not between that choice. Rather, the choice is between kill one child or everybody in the society dies because there's not enough food to go around. Same thing with the old people. Why do the old go out to die? Well, because they've reached a point in which they cannot contribute to the group, and having them live any longer is going to take away from the well-being of the society and threaten everybody. You can think of other cases like this with things like cannibalism. Most of us do not think cannibalism, eating other human beings, is acceptable. But we can imagine extreme circumstances in which that seems like, if not the right thing to do, then a perfectly okay thing to do. So a classic case of this was in the 1980s. There was a Chilean rugby team whose plane crashed in the Andes Mountains. Several people died in the plane crash and everyone else was stranded up there. And they knew they were up on this mountain that they were not, no one was coming for them. No one could find them. So they knew the only way they were going to survive is for some people to walk down to civilization and tell everyone else, the rescue teams, where the rest of the people were. But these people had no food because it was supposed to be a short flight. The only available nutrients were the bodies of the dead who had died and frozen. So these people chose, you know what, if we're going to save everyone, we are going to have to eat the bodies of the dead, use that energy, and save everyone. So here's another case where you might think like, oh, these people, you hear about cannibalism, they don't value humans, they don't care about things the same way we do. but maybe it's just that they're in extreme circumstances. So Rachel's idea here is when people point to the sorts of behaviors that are supposed to show that cultures have different morals than we do, maybe what's actually going on is that they're just in extreme circumstances. And really, something that might look like a value difference in values or difference in morality is the same values as ours and shows a sense of objective morality. It's just an objective morality that is filtered through different types of conditions, extreme ones, less extreme ones, changes in temperature, heat, etc. So what Rachel's point here is that not everything that on the surface looks like good evidence for cultural relativism is actually evidence for cultural relativism. So when you combine these issues with the other ones we talked about, he thinks that we should be moral objectivists. We should go back to thinking there's a right way of doing things and a wrong way that's the same for everybody. And that if you actually look at the details of how we behave and you actually look at the underlying causes, there's good reason to think that that's really the case. So that's what these last two arguments from the Rachels are. All right, that's all I have to say today. If you're writing on the second paper prompt, hopefully you watched this video. If not, well, have a good day.